So back in the 2000s, 1990s, 1980s, Enron was created in 1985 by Kenneth Lay, which was the chairman and CEO. He merged two companies that he had, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. And their names were merged as well to HNG Internorth. And the next year, maybe he saw a man running, Enron. Okay, I'm just keep going. The joke was not good. But in 1986, he changed the name to Enron. It was a company that mined oil for its best product and sent it through pipelines across America over the 80 companies, and more precisely 85 companies across the borders of America. For 6 years after its creation, it was America's most innovative company, although not a lot of people know about it. It was 7th out of the best 500. Not right now, definitely not right now, but it was 7th out of the 500 then in 1990. There was a problem though. In 1990, the pipelines weren't more secured by the law. Before they were secured by the law, but the Congress adopted some laws that deregulated the management over the pipelines. So they needed something or someone to help them do it. Advancing 10 years, they hired a new CEO, but not a chairman, a new CEO who served from February to August 2001, which was Jeffrey Skilling. He changed the culture of the company from mining or being miners or being the producers to being the financial contract negotiators. For example, if a natural gas emission company which invested in them, or a natural gas electronical company which also invested in them, brought a product for $2,000, they, Enron, would find a customer or a consumer that has the same price in mind for the same quantity. This saved those companies a lot of time to focus on their products instead of focusing on the finance, because then there were fluctuations, which were, for example, you can wake up one day and say, man, I got a little money, bro. Like, I should get a car, should got new clothes, shit like that. But the next day, you can wake up and say, man, I don't ever got money at all. You start walking dogs and trying to get the most money you can. And they had someone or something that can help them manage those financial intuitions. He also created aggressive trading within the company. This was basically a competitive scene where NBA officials, electronical officials, or officials from distant but professional expertise will come together and battle it out to see who can get the best contract or the most consumers. And one of the person they hired from that economy was Andrew Fastow, who later became their chief financial officer. They were also in a bull market economy, which also helped them. A bull market economy is where stocks or investments into a company skyrockets. So your revenue and your profit you're going to get from it is going to be so high. And they also help them vary in the production. So before, they only help contract electronics and oil and natural gases. But now they could sell coal, paper, steel, and even like predictions for the weather. There was also a situation where everyone in Houston, Texas, which is where they were based, they actually went online, like we are now, like virtual online. So it was called a dot-com boom or dot-com bubble. This is where, like I said before, companies or business goes online. So Jeffrey Skilling helped them create their own website. It was called Enron Online. Pretty basic. No, not too fit for the most innovative, but it was pretty basic. But despite that, it was the second best online moving company in America. It was crazy. But they also had a service, a telecommunication service like AT&T and T-Mobile, where it's Wi-Fi basically. They had their own Wi-Fi. So they had private channels. But later, in the middle of 2001, they realized they had a lot of problems. What led to their decline or their abundance of problems was increased competition. So they realized that they were a very big company and they're going to get a lot of competition. So it also put them under pressure when they had more products, like apart from the electronic or electricity and apart from the coal, they had weather, steel, paper. I said that before, but I'm just trying to clarify because this diverse leadership and production actually brought them down instead of make them spread across the nations and interiors and exteriors as well. So their pressure made Kenneth Lay, the chairman, he made his employees buy more shares while they themselves, they sold large amounts of stock. It seemed as if the employees, their pensions were safe. These pensions were your retirement plans. That is, after you've retired, they're going to give you a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time, close to your normal work pay. So it made them seem as if the pensions were safe or clear. But no, Enron was actually going down because you could see they were sharing stocks. So they had to do something. One of which they did was mark to market. Mark to market is an economy where you could write unrealized future gains and make it into current income. So if you didn't notice that you made a deal and you let it see it and say, oh wow, this is actually a lot of money, you can transfer it in a contract or negotiation with the third party or the second party you did it with. And it's going to transfer it to what you're going to get now, your current revenue. And speaking of revenue, Enron had over $100 billion in revenue. That is a lot of money. That money I would take, I would buy an island and just live there till dawn. I don't know if you know that game. Amazing game, by the way. And more to this, it had over 21,000 employees. Almost all the employees, their pensions were not safe. They also went to fraudulent measures. One was an SPE. An SPE is a special purpose entity, or SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle. It held troubling assets. So if you have assets that have too much liability or too much risk on them, you can give them to the SPE. They would take it, manage it, hold it for a fee, of course, so that it seems your company or your record doesn't have any problems. But they did, which was Enron as well. Enron dumped so many assets because there were assets they couldn't handle. So they dumped so many into the SPE and the SPVs. And it seemed as if Enron was a good company, but they really weren't. They had so much assets they couldn't hold. And ironically, one of these companies was owned by the Andrew Fastow, which was the chief financial officer. So guess what they did? They dumped even double what they had before. So now they were safe. They weren't safe in the terms of I'm not going to be caught. They were safe in the terms of my business is going to keep going because my assets, they're not as liable as they were before. There was another problem which they did. They had an auditor and consultant for many years, many years. But they created somewhat like a triangle with the first, second, and third party. So the first party was Enron itself. So Enron, for example, it kept doing its business. And if it gets in debt or has an asset that is uncontrollable, it will give it to the SPE, which was owned by their own officer, Andrew Fastow. Now, Andrew Fastow would take these assets, conduct them, keep conducting them as they keep coming in, or there's more assets that Enron gets. And from these, he's going to give it to their own auditing company or consulting company, which is called Arthur Andersen Limited Liability Partnership. He would give it to this partnership, this company, and they would check the documents in which SPE and Enron, in which they transmitted to each other. They would check it. They would check it for forgery or consistent selling, which is what Enron did. But they wouldn't talk because they wanted cooperation with Enron. So Enron was safe in those two departments. If you were there in Houston, Texas in the 1990s, and you looked at Enron, there would be no files that says, yo, Enron is a bad company. But within, they are. It was inevitable, though. There were agencies that, if you played Among Us, you would notice. Imposter and Mogus. I just sounded so clumsy right there. Amogus, Enron was sus. Enron was really sus. Although you wouldn't seem, or they wouldn't seem sus, they had some public financial records which they forgot to hide. So analysts, memorandums from vice company managers or officers, even the SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department was investigating Enron. When they found out that their fraudulence or their company was spamming into the SBEs, it was made known to the public that they were not a good company. This was so fatal to Enron, and it was so vital because, like I said, they held the pensions, but they held their pensions in stock. So if their stock goes down, it means their pensions are going to go down, and the contracts they made with employees or some shareholders are not going to be secure. More to this, their share, they had $90 per share if you invest in their stock, but now it was less than $1. It was cents now. That surprised me. It wasn't no longer dollars, it was cents now. So what happened is that billions of dollars or billions of dollars worth of shareholders were let down by Enron. $2.1 billion, if I remember, of money for the pensions was lost. They were in so much debt. One of the electronic companies that invested in Enron, which is Dynegy, $8.4 billion, they let out. They resigned from Enron. They didn't want to be an Enron company anymore. When Enron saw this, they were famished. In addition to what they saw, they had federal lawsuits, they had civil lawsuits, they had shareholder lawsuits filed against them. And what happens when you have too much debt? You have to go to bankruptcy. Enron, December 2001, filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 11. They had to pay a defined rate from month to month, 3 to 5 years. It didn't really help them, though. It cost billions of dollars to investors. Shareholders in total lost over $74 billion. My oh my, I can't even begin to describe what I would do with that money. It wiped out about 5,600 jobs. They had 29,000 staff, just to show you the comparison. And at the end of the month, which is from December to the next year, which was 2002, they already liquidated $2.1 billion. That's to show you that Enron had a lot of money to pay. In about 2 months, they already paid over $1 billion. It would take years to do that, years to finish that. And what happened was that Kenneth Lay, and Jeffrey Skinning saw that they couldn't handle the business. And so they backed out. They resigned from the company. And they also fired Andrew Fastow 2 days after, the organization investigated them. Even one of the executives, he unfortunately committed suicide in May 2001 because he saw what he was going through. He saw that this debt, this fraudulent acts could not be held, man. In a total, after the Enron's document was shown, they had over $80 billion to pay. Close to $100 million, close to the revenue they were making. Because Enron itself was already $16 million in assets. That's crazy. That's a lot of money, man. Nigerian accent came out there. They had $40 billion from shareholders, $13 billion from parent companies, $20 billion from affiliates, and just 20 more to balance it out by the law. And Enron now, for example, it was so bad that if I was Enron and you called me Abel, they would look like, who's that fraud, bro? So if you have a company and be like, your company is Enron, bro, people are going to look at you like, man, no one should invest in this company. That's how it was. Enron was known for bad stuff. Large-scale corporate fraud and corruption. After that, because of Enron's act, though, they had a good positive and negative ending. The positive one, it was that they created regulations. People were going to abuse this. One was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, where if you have financial records that you destroy or that are fraudulent, they're gonna have like harsh penalties for that. More to this, they also created a law that prohibited auditing firms like the Arthur Anderson one from doing any concurrent consulting business for a single company like Enron, because Enron was always getting documents or auditing from Andrew Anderson, and so it wasn't fair. It wasn't good by the law. Speaking of Andrew Anderson, it was caught in the 2002 when the law was made. Its reputation was worse than Enron because it was so down bad that it had to dissolve its company. So the company had to stop. Over time, it had to stop. They saw, bro, you can't go in moving like everyone's afraid of you or no one likes you, bro. You had to dissolve. That's how they felt. And there were penalties though. 2 years after, 2 years after the law was created, July 2004, a Houston court indicted Skilling and Lay for over 30 counts of fraud, conspiracy, insider trading, negative negotiations, gambling as well. They were not in the best position. 2 years after, again, in January 30th, they were brought to court. They found them. They did not let them go. They found them and said, you've been doing some mad things, you know. They also brought some of their employees that they had in Enron before so they could justify. And one person that did not, he said, I'm not going to go to jail. I'm not going to go to jail. Was Andrew Fastow, the person they fired, their chief financial officer that owned an SBE. It was like no one knew he did. But some people knew he did, though. But no one knew he did. He was an ex-CEO now. CFO now. After Kenneth Lay left, he had to become the ex-CEO. But he was brought to court, and he already pleaded guilty to 2 of the counts in conspiracy. They agreed. And he also testified against his former boss. He said, I saw him do that. I saw him do this, which was Jeffrey Skilling. I saw him do this. And they almost let him go. They did not, but they almost let him go. He still had some debt to pay. And within that May as well, Skilling was convicted of 19 out of 35 counts, and Lay was convicted for 10 counts. This was almost, I say, a felony, a federal lawsuit, a federal case, because Skilling, that year, 52 by the way, he went to prison for 24 years. So it was recently that he actually left prison. Plus, it's 24 years, some of the executives actually went to prison as well. No one was safe. Lay, unfortunately, died 2 months after, they sentenced the county gifted. He really couldn't handle it, man. Andrew Fastow also was put in a lot of debt. And eventually, Enron ended. 2007, Enron officially stopped. But not the whole company. It was another form. The other form was called Enron Creditors Recovery Corporation. Even worse than the Enron that Kenneth Lay made. So, not the company itself. I'm talking about the name, by the way. I'm just joking. So, the company dedicated itself to paying Enron's debt. So, after that, they're probably going to shut down the company. It wasn't really a company anymore. It was inactive. There was no transactions. They really had no assets to buy, for people to buy from. So they were just paying off Enron's debt. Some of the executives that were honest were paying Enron's debt. They had a lot. That shows they had a lot of debt. And they're still going on now. They still have a little to pay. Because on July 2016, the 12th, they had a corporate filing. So they gave their information out that they're actually paying the debt. So at the end, Enron was dispersed. There were no more leaders. It was just executives that were handling the businesses. But at least it was positive. They made laws.